You are 12 years old, standing in a crowd in a small Bavarian town when a prince points at your father and orders him to kill a man. Not because your father is a soldier, not because he's done anything wrong. He's a woodsman. He has never held a rope meant for a human neck in his life. But the prince, a man named Albrecht Alcibiades, margrave of Brandenburg-Kulmbach, remembered even in his own century for cruelty, needs 3 men hanged, and for reasons no record fully explains, he decides your father will be the one to do it. There is no version of this where your father says no. Refusing a ruling prince in 1553 isn't a choice. It's a different, faster kind of death sentence, aimed at you instead of the men on the gallows. So he does it. He kills 3 strangers with his own hands, in front of everyone who has ever known him, in the town he has to keep living in afterward. And here's what nobody tells you about that moment. It doesn't end when the bodies are cut down. The town doesn't forgive him for surviving it. From that single afternoon forward, your father is unclean, a word with real legal weight in the 16th century. He's barred from guilds, barred from certain trades, certain church privileges, certain forms of ordinary town life you've never had to think twice about. He's marked in a way that doesn't wash off with time, apology, or good behavior. And it doesn't stop with him. It comes for you next, whether you've done anything at all. 20 years later, you're 18 years old, standing where your father once stood, learning the very same trade, because there was never another option laid out in front of you. Historian Joel Harrington, who spent years reconstructing this family's story from a document almost nobody had read in 400 years, put the mechanism plainly. Once your father was marked, you inherited the mark automatically, the way you'd inherit a debt. Not the guilt behind it, just the punishment for it, passed down like property. This is the story of Franz Schmidt, and it gets worse in specific and documented ways before it gets anywhere close to better. By 1573, you're an apprentice executioner in Bamberg, working directly under your own father's supervision, learning a kind of precision most people alive right now have never had to think about once. A clean death by the sword isn't brutality, it's technique, the angle of the blade, the exact moment it meets the neck, the steadiness of your own hand while a crowd of hundreds watches and judges. Get it wrong, and it isn't just a professional embarrassment you shake off by morning. Crowds in this period sometimes turned violent against executioners who botched the job in public, treating a clumsy death as evidence that something sacred had gone wrong, that the condemned might have been innocent, or that you, the executioner, were somehow tainted beyond even what your birth had already decided. So you learn. You get precise. You get good enough that 5 years later, in 1578, at 23 years old, you're offered the executioner's post in Nuremberg, one of the most powerful free imperial cities in the empire, a city of roughly 40,000 people, and according to later scholarship built directly off your own records, Nuremberg during your lifetime had the highest execution rate per capita of any city in the empire. 9 deaths a year, on average, delivered by your hand in a job made only more in demand by a new imperial law code called the Carolina, which raised the professional standard for executioners across German lands, and in doing so, spiked arrests and executions everywhere it took hold. This should feel like a rival, a young man from a disgraced family securing a real position, a real salary, a real title in one of the most important cities in the empire. But the moment you take the job, you do something almost nobody in your position had ever done before you. You start writing everything down. Not confessions, not private grief scrawled in the dark. A record, dates, names, exact crimes, exact methods. Rope for most. The sword, for those the law considered worthy of a faster death. The breaking wheel, reserved only for the most violent offenders the city had. And here's the detail that historians studying the manuscript keep circling back to, because it doesn't fit a simple explanation. You don't start the journal with your very first execution back in 1573. You started in 1578, the year you arrive in Nuremberg. And then you go back and reconstruct 5 full years of executions from memory, without exact dates, filling in a past you apparently didn't think worth recording at the time you lived it. Harrington's reading of that timing is the hinge the entire story turns on. You weren't keeping a diary. You were building a case file for yourself, decades before you had any evidence you'd ever get to present it to anyone who mattered. Because here's what the job actually costs you. Every single day you hold it, regardless of how skilled you become. In the eyes of the law and the eyes of your neighbors, you are still unclean. You cannot buy meat at the open market like an honest man of your city. In towns across German lands, an executioner has to point at what he wants and let someone else's hands physically complete the purchase, because your touch alone is considered contaminating enough to spoil the transaction. You cannot join a guild, no matter how skilled your actual craft becomes. Your children cannot easily marry outside a small, closed circle of other executioner families scattered across the empire, because almost no honorable household will take them in. You live inside a stigma you never personally chose, doing a job the state legally requires of you, and the same public socially despises you for, at the exact same moment, in the exact same breath. And the strange, almost unbelievable part is that you become good at the other half of understanding a human body too. Over the decades, you build a second, unofficial career on the side, as a healer. By your own estimate, recorded plainly in your own journal, you eventually treat something like 15,000 patients over your lifetime, most of them poor, most of them people the licensed, guild-approved physicians of Nuremberg wouldn't lower themselves to touch. The same hands the town won't let near a market stall are the hands the town's poorest residents quietly, secretly, urgently trust with their broken bones and open wounds. You are the person Nuremberg genuinely needs, twice over, and the person Nuremberg officially refuses to admit it needs, at all. Both truths, permanently, at the exact same time. And the dishonor doesn't stay confined to the killing itself. Across German lands in this period, executioners were also handed the tasks nobody else in the city would touch, disposing of animal carcasses, managing the brothel, hauling away refuse, burning the bodies of suicides denied consecrated burial. In Nuremberg specifically, the job comes with an assistant known in the records only as the Lion, whose entire function is absorbing the most visibly degrading of these duties so that some small distance can exist between you and the very worst of it. Even that distance is a kind of luxury most executioners in smaller, poorer jurisdictions never get. And even with it, the label follows you everywhere the Lion can't reach. Into the market, into the church pews you're not permitted to sit in freely, into the marriage negotiations for your own children. This is where the surface story, a man killing people for a living, stops being the actual point of the story. The real story is what you spend 45 years quietly doing about a sentence you never personally agreed to serve. Every single entry in that journal is a small, deliberate act of proof. Proof that you are precise. Proof that you are pious. Proof of something the historical record genuinely describes as compassion, surfacing inside a job architecturally built on its total absence. You pushing, more than once, to have a woman's legally prescribed death by drowning commuted instead to a faster death by the sword. Arguing the case yourself alongside sympathetic clergy. Entry after entry, building the portrait of a man trying to do an impossible job with something resembling a conscience intact. You are not trying to escape the job. 2 decades in, you already know that's simply not available to you. You are trying to out-document the shame permanently attached to it, to build, sentence by sentence, year by year, a paper record so thorough and so morally careful that eventually it becomes impossible to keep calling your family unclean. By the end of your career, the case is finally, fully made. Nearly 400 executions logged in your own hand, alongside hundreds of floggings and lesser punishments, all recorded with a level of detail no other executioner's document from this entire period comes close to matching, according to the historians who've since studied it. And it works. Late in your life, after decades of exactly this kind of relentless, deliberate record-keeping, the City Council of Nuremberg and the Emperor himself formally declare your honor, and your children's honor, and every generation after them, officially restored. In writing, sealed, the stain your father never asked for, and that you personally spent 45 years working against one entry at a time, is legally lifted. Not from you alone, but from your entire bloodline going forward, permanently. You did what almost no one born into a dishonorable trade in this period of European history ever managed to do. You wrote your way out of it. Somewhere back at the very start of this, there's a 12-year-old boy standing in a crowd, watching his father's hands close around a rope he never asked to hold. That boy grows up to become the most precise, most closely documented executioner in the empire, and then spends his entire adult life turning that precision into evidence, page after page, decade after decade, that he was never actually the crime his family was punished for in the first place. We don't do this with ropes and swords anymore, but we still do it. We still decide, quietly and often permanently, that certain people have to spend their entire lives proving they're more than the worst thing ever attached to their name. A mistake, a job, a family, a single afternoon they didn't choose and couldn't have stopped. Franz Schmidt got his honor back in writing, from an emperor, after 45 years of documented, exhausting proof. Most people never get the document. They just keep writing the case.